Good afternoon, and welcome to our Grow Native webinar, Native Plants and Public Art, a conversation with Julie Farstad. My name is Haley, and I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator for the Missouri Prairie Foundation. I want to thank you all for joining us for this webinar today, which will blend Julie's presentation with interview questions posed by MPF Executive Director Carol Davit. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section on your screen, and at the end, Carol will read those out to Julie. This webinar is being recorded, and the link will be shared with all of you tomorrow, along with resources mentioned during the presentation and Q&A session. And now for some background on Julie. Julie Farstad was born and raised in Elmira, New York. She earned her BFA in painting at the University of Notre Dame and her MFA in painting at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Julie is an artist and professor of painting at the Kansas City Art Institute and explores native plants in the act of cultivation in the context of ecological crisis in mixed media studio artwork and community-based painting projects. She creates public-facing artwork in her Flowers for Marble project that confronts neighborhood blight by sharing the beauty and function of native plants through large-scale painting, free workshops, and giving away free native plant seedlings to the Marlboro community. Her oil paintings on panel, including her new Wildflower Revolution series that explores the intricate forms of the native plants of the Midwest, are represented by the ZG Gallery in Chicago. We are thrilled to have Julie here today to share her beautiful artwork and native plant passion with us. And now I will hand it over to Julie.
Thank you so much, Haley, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Julie, for joining us. This is a real treat for me to be able to visit with you. And I know that everyone attending and watching the recording will feel the same way. So thank you so much for being with us. And just a little bit of background on how I got to have the great fortune of meeting and working with Julie is that Julie and the Missouri Prairie Foundation entered into a partnership where the Prairie Foundation provided a grant to fund the development of murals in Julie's neighborhood that she'll talk more about later on, and also some educational events in her neighborhood. So Julie, well, I love seeing these two paintings right here. Can you tell us some about early experiences that led you to become a painter and to have the being an artist as a profession?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Carol. And yeah, so I guess early on, I grew up seeing, but my parents were not artists, but they were always, my dad was a amateur photographer and had a dark room, and my mom was always doing some sort of fiber work, whether it's knitting or crocheting or sewing. And so I saw people making things. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, started painting when her kids were all grown, and I was always sort of fascinated by her studio. And then my brother actually was sort of like the artist growing up. And I remember just standing in the doorway to his bedroom and just smelling the oil paint and just wanting so much to be using to paint. And I was always drawn to making things. I survived high school by making a giant wall collage in my bedroom. And then when I went to Notre Dame, I want to show this work. My professor, Maria Tomasula, really showed me what a life could look like as an artist. And so this is one of her paintings. And I was her studio assistant, and nanny for her kids. And so I got to see what it looks like to have a studio in your house, to have a family, to be a professor, and to see what that life could look like, because before I didn't really know what that could be. So yeah, it was really meeting Maria Tomasula and seeing what a life could look like as an artist.
That's important to think about it in terms of what a life would look like, not just be an artist, but what the life would look like. And that's great that you had her as a professor and I guess a mentor too yeah, that's wonderful. And if you, and so then you went on to study art, and then did you work as an artist or work as a teacher before coming to Kansas City, or did you do other things in between?
Yes. So I went, before coming to Kansas City, I moved here for the job teaching at the Kansas City Art Institute. I went to graduate school in Urbana-Champaign and then moved to Chicago, and I adjunct taught for 5 years and worked in an art gallery and did odd jobs and showed work and just hustled and did just about anything to as a part-time job to make ends meet, so that, because in order to get a full-time teaching job, you need all of this adjunct experience. So it was just yeah, a lot of hard work in Chicago to be able to apply for jobs. And then I applied nationally for jobs and just fell in love with the Kansas City Art Institute when I came to visit for my interview.
Wonderful. And so tell us about your career in Kansas City.
So I've been here for math since 2005, and since I've been here, I've taught in the painting department and in social practice, and I teach major studio in painting, and I've taught sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and right now I'm teaching sophomores. We have the students twice a week, 6 hours each time, so it's a lot of contact time, and it's just amazing to be at a school where you don't have to fight for the validity of art. Everybody believes that it's important. Everybody wants to be making art. And the students who take your classes aren't just fulfilling their fine arts requirement. They're here because they want to be an artist of one kind or another. So, during this time, I've been allowed to develop all kinds of elective classes. And so most recently, the elective class that I'm going to kind of show you a few images from are from my cultivation class. And when I started getting into, I fell hard for native plants, right? So when I started getting into it, it kind of like my artwork changed, my whole life sort of changed. And so did my teaching. And so one of the things that I started to do is, so I built this class where we look at the way that artists have been inspired by plants in their work. We go to different types of gardens in Kansas City. Luckily, we're in walking distance to 5 different types of gardens. And one of the things that we do is we'll make inks from plants. So on the left side, you can see some of the inks that I made with students. These Coreopsis and sumac. We make pokeweed makes an amazing ink. And then on the right are some of my seedlings that I brought in so students could draw them and become familiar with native plants. And part of this class, being a social practice class, involves making work that engages with the public. So here are some of their pieces. So on the left, a student, we talked about how we treat our lawns as these, status carpets, right? And so this student made a piece about leaving the leaves and how leaves provide habitat and food and shelter and all that kind of stuff. And so the student made prints on all of these leaves found on campus. And then another group of students made these posters to put all over campus that are sort of like a "have you seen me?" And kind of the main point is, no, you haven't, because none of these plants are anywhere, right? Like students at KCAI are genuinely concerned about social issues, environmental issues. And when they start to learn more about native plants and more about how grass is just an ecological desert, they sort of take ownership of that. So they made all of these colorful posters to put up that kind of challenge people to find native plants and wildlife on campus. Another student made all of these samples, like basically found all of the native plants that she could and just made different samples of them, figuring out what colors that she could make, and eventually made a quilted piece. And then the piece on the top left is two observed drawings. And then on the bottom right, a student collected leaves from campus and then made paper from them. And then we all drew on the paper, and we talked about and he taught us all about, how much water is wasted in paper and bleaching and all these kind of things. So students are gaining an awareness of the materials they use and how can they be more ecologically minded? How can they be more sustainable? And a lot of them are really interested in challenging the notions of whether something needs to be archival. Does everything need to last forever, right? Like that's always been this big standard in the art world. It was always a gotcha question when I was in school is, how is this archival? And a lot of students are like, we don't have that much fresh groundwater left. Like, like, is that a big priority anymore, right? So developing these socially engaged classes has become a real passion of mine at KCAI.
That is really fascinating and wonderful that the students are thinking and through your guidance, not just about the subject material, but the material and the question of permanence. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of struck me about when I started to learn about tallgrass prairie, right, was, I used to feel like jealous of like friends of mine who lived in Europe where there'd be all these like monuments and ancient, ruins and stuff like that. And then the more I learned about the tallgrass prairie, how grateful I am that the indigenous people did not have that mindset, that they lived sustainably, that they didn't build these tall structures that dominated the landscape. And that, now that unfortunately most of the prairie is gone, but we still have these remnants of prairie that we can appreciate because of the way they lived. So yeah, I try to kind of share that with my students, and they're teaching me too. They're very open and excited about these ideas.
That's fantastic. Do you see your students learning? Do you find that they're learning about native plants outside of your classes? Do they share that, or do you feel it?
Yeah, it's a real range, right? Like some of them have grown up in nature and can, identify all the trees and have grown up on farms and things like that. And then other students had never gone hiking before. And so it was really great to bring everybody to like Lakeside Nature Center in Kansas City and just go hiking and have us all kind of share our different points of view and experiences. And yeah, then you find out somebody's like a mushroom expert and somebody else is like, like it's really exciting to take people out of the context of the institution and bring them into nature. And one of my students said something really interesting to me once. We actually went over to Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center, which is like amazing here in Kansas City. And we were in the forest area, and he said, you know, this school wants us to be, talking about KCAI, wants us to be so creative, but they put us in these white cubes. But when I come out here in nature in the forest, I feel creative. I feel like there's so many possibilities. There's so many different kinds of answers and so many new relationships. And that was just such a profound like moment for all of us to sort of kind of take that in and think about maybe new ways of approaching teaching art, you know, and
Wow.
looking to nature for questions and solutions and ideas. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And do you want to share more of your studio art, or do you, I know you've done all, you know, public art, and we want to talk about that as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I started out completely plant blind, right? Like I didn't know anything about this. So I wanted to do like a shout out to, you know, some of my important teachers on this journey. So I've got like a picture of Anita B. Gorman, and then I've got Alex Daniel and Sydney Ross, who do native plants at noon, and who spent so much time with me over at Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center. I spent a year going twice a week there to watch the native plants and to document them twice a week to see what do they look like now, what to expect. And they were always so enthusiastic and generous. Braiding Sweetgrass was a book that was life-changing. On the bottom left is a Green Dreamer podcast, which is a really great podcast about sort of seeding ecological change. And then throughout the pandemic, I was watching all of the Missouri Prairie Foundation webinars and just sort of taking all of this in, because it was new. It was like, you know, that Helen Keller moment of like understanding that like water is this sign, right? It was like, oh, that's this plant and that's this plant. And these are the animals that they host. And it was just amazing. And so I started painting them. And for me, painting is one of the ways that I get to know something, right? Yeah, for me, somehow, like it was the way of understanding. So I started painting native plants on these big Tyvek sheets. And Tyvek is like this recycled kind of plastic product that is used in housing insulation. Anyway, so during the pandemic, I was like, you know, we were all at home, and I live in a blighted neighborhood in Marlboro, and it's an amazing neighborhood with incredible people. And there are a lot of abandoned houses on our street. And I was researching like how that affects you, your mental health, your physical health. And I was thinking about, you know, going through this pandemic and just feeling really helpless, right? And then at the same time, feeling really inspired by these plants. So this house was just down the street from me, and it had all these boarded up windows. And right in the front yard was where my son and his friends would play football. And it was so depressing to see them playing football in front of this boarded up house. And I also was developing these connections with my neighbors who are just generous, kind, amazing people. And so I thought, you know, what can I do? You know, so I just thought, what if I just started painting on these houses, right? Like, what if I, and also thinking about what if these plants were here, right? These are the plants that should have been here. And I wish I could bring them all back. And so some of the members of the neighborhood community coalition helped to connect me to homeowners, you know, and call them and get permission to do these. So I did this one. And then there was this house a couple blocks over that was like a dart house, which means it's like a meth house. And so it got boarded up. And so through the Marlboro Arts and Culture Task Force, I invited two other artists. Adam Crowley is the two works on the left. Mine are the two in the center, and Anna Goodwin are the ones on the right, to work with me on this, to paint native plants. And so we kind of separately worked in our studios and then put them up, and trying to sort of also beautify the neighborhood a little bit. But another thing that kind of happens with boarded up houses is people like leave their trash there. But when you start putting art on the house, people stop doing that. Right. So it's like there's these surprise things that would happen. Like people realize that, like, oh, somebody cares about this space. Like, and then you can see the house, the painting that's on the right side of this long wall that has like this purple flower.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Adam was going to put up a painting there. His is right next to it. And he was going to bring it the next day. And I went and looked, and somebody did that one. And we don't know who did it. And I just love the idea that somebody else in the neighborhood was like, oh, there's a spot, I'm going to do it. And it's great. And it looks like bee balm, right? It's like, it's this wonderful painting. And so I guess one of the things that sort of was surprising about that was that people wanted to join in, you know?
Right. That's so cool. And it's kind of like what your students said, that they're inspired to be creative outside in nature. And then somebody was inspired by somebody else's creativity in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
really cool.
Yeah, totally. And they brought a ladder. Like it wasn't easy to do that, right? Like they brought supplies, and there's bits of mirror glued on. It's incredible. And I never figured out, I tried to find out through social media, like who did it, and I never found out. But yeah, I love that. And this is a piece that I did on the front of the old Marlboro School that is getting turned into a multi-use building in the neighborhood. And kids want to be involved, right? So I was thinking about how do I get the kids in the neighborhood? And there's a lot of children on my street. And so one day I thought, I'm just going to bring a table out and see if the kids want to paint with me. And so we just had a kind of spontaneous painting party, and they really enjoyed it. And I said, if you just paint one of these purple cone flowers, then you can paint whatever that you want after that, but just humor me and let me teach you a little bit about this flower. And so that then kind of developed into these community events where anybody could come and learn about native plants through painting them. And it was just a wonderful way to get to know my neighbors and to connect with other people, and to share just my love of native plants and all of their like uses and purposes, and the way that they interact with other beings in the ecosystem. And so yeah, I love these, and I've become really good friends with some of the people who've come to these, which is amazing. And then yeah, I want to just show you one more. The piece that we worked together on focused on Rachel Morado Park, which is this gorgeous green infrastructure park that's right down the street from me. It's just incredible. And people don't really know what it does, right? But it's all these native grasses and plants that help to filter our rainwater. And so this was this underpass, and then these are the murals that you helped me make, that feature all of the native plants that are in the park. And I think that it was really interesting to spend a lot of time right there and feel you'd see the same people going to walk their dogs or ride their bikes. And it was a really interesting way to get to know the neighborhood.
That's so lovely. And I'm seeing a number of comments in the chat of how lovely other people feel as well.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
And I know you, and for those who don't know, and we'll share a link to it in an email that will go out tomorrow with a link to the recording of the webinar. But Julie wrote a beautiful article for the Missouri Prairie Journal, so you can read more about her, how she developed, how she learned about, things that inspired her, and more photos of her artwork. But in the article, you talked about reactions to the murals, and maybe you're going to talk about that, but if you're not, please do.
Oh, it was really cool. There was, people would just stop their cars and pull over and just say, thank you so much. It was depressing looking at all the graffiti. Or there was one man who lived a couple doors down who was like, don't worry, I'm watching out for these. I'm making sure nobody does anything to them. And I saw another parent with a child come around the corner, and they said to their child, see, I told you were going to see something special. And that just killed me. That was just like amazing, because I think that when you live in a neighborhood that has blight and graffiti and boarded up windows, you start to feel like you don't feel like you live somewhere special. And everybody should feel like their neighborhood is special and that they're part of something. And I feel like that's one of the things that public art can do, right? Is help you feel like you're part of something. It gives an identity and a sense of optimism and pride. And there were definitely, like, there was a guy who liked to ride his motorcycle back and forth and like rev his engine and like do weird stuff like that, right? Like there were some sketchy moments for sure. There was another person who didn't like it because, why am I painting these country murals in the city? This is a city. And that made me realize so much, like how people separate, right? Like how much, and made me even more interested in understanding how can we live in nature, and how we need to live in nature and not see ourselves as separate, right? And here we are, right? This is right adjacent to this like green infrastructure site, right? And so it's like people have no idea what that bit of nature is helping them do. It's basically keeping their basements dry, hopefully. But I wanted to share two inspirations, if we have a second.
Yeah, please do.
One of my big inspirations is Grandpa Rainbow, who is a war veteran and lived in Taiwan. And the government was going to shut down his village, and everybody was going to be homeless. And he didn't know what to do about that, but he loved to paint. And so he just started painting on all of the walls of the village. And people started to come, and then they needed restaurants to feed people, and people would post it on Instagram. And so instead of, bulldozing the village, the government ended up embracing the village. And so his home was saved, the homes of many people was saved. And so it's like, you just think painting like a cute bear on the wall seems like a ridiculous way to save your home, but it actually could work, right? Like, and so I like to show this to students to show that, like, maybe the solution isn't always the most obvious one, and maybe it's a really playful solution, and maybe it's even a joyful solution. But there are ways that art can have like real world effects. And this is a really moving piece. It's called Solitary Gardens by Jackie Sumel. And basically she started a conversation with a man named Herman Wallace, who was unjustly imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit and put in solitary confinement. And she asked him, what did he miss? And he missed gardening. And so she started to build these gardens in the shape of his cell.
Wow.
Solitary confinement. And volunteers would come, and they would be paired up with imprisoned people. And the person who was imprisoned would write to this person and tell them what they want to plant and when and what their plan is. And so these are the proxy gardeners who would then document the garden and send them back. And it was a way of connecting people who are imprisoned to the outside world, connecting them to the land, connecting people on the outside with people on the inside through the land. And it's just such a moving project. And it's ongoing and at different sites across the US. And it's just one of those pieces that when I saw it, I was like, this is so beautiful. This is so moving. Yeah, I just can't believe sort of the privilege that we have to even be in nature, right? To be able to have our hands in the dirt, and it reminds us, and it's just a way to connect so many people who are going through so much trauma in a gorgeous project. And then people can come and harvest the food and eat or get flowers or whatever through the project. And so people who don't even know each other become community through it.
It's so powerful. And I really like, when you had the painting party, I think sometimes, meeting people, making conversation might be awkward, but if someone has a task to do and they actually don't have to make eye contact, they're like looking at what they're painting, can be this great way to meet people. And thinking about what you said about the gentleman who said, well, why are you not painting a city and a cityscape? And then the act of you going to the Discovery Center twice a week or twice a day, I forgot what you said. And so you're witnessing these changes. And then when you are painting, and you said, when I paint, it's how I get to know a subject. You're having to look so carefully. And so when other people are painting, they're looking carefully. So they're getting to know the plants. And so it's so cool that you're bringing not just the paintings, but then the art of seeing plants. You're bringing the art of seeing plants to your neighbors. But you're also bringing the actual plants, which I think you're going to talk about next.
Yes. So yeah, totally. I learned about winter sowing on the internet and lost my mind. It was something that, you feel so helpless, right? Like when it comes to all of the multi-crises in the world, right? And then especially like in the winter, when it feels like, it's so cold, it's so gray, and I had no idea that you could start growing plants. And so I learned that, native plants need to go through all the seasons, like nature, right? Like their seeds disperse, they drop their seeds, or they fly away, or an animal carries them somewhere, and they go through winter, and they need to go through winter. And I wanted to share all these plants with my neighbors. And I thought, like, I'm gonna try this. In the first year, I gave away like these dinky, teeny weeny, like little tiny seedlings. And it was the first time, and I didn't know what I was doing. But like so I use these milk jugs or like lasagna trays or like basically any container I would try, like cat litter, anything that has a like clearish plastic. It makes like a little greenhouse. And so you just, you get damp soil and you put it in there and you put your seeds on top and then you just wait. And it was something that I could put out a couple trays, every few days. And then my goal was to like make it to the trampoline, right? Like to make it all the way down the side of the house to the trampoline. And yeah, and then but then the first time you go out and you like peek in there and you see these little seedlings and you're like, it works. And then it's like, then your mind is blown by how amazing seeds are, right? Like, and it just, I think about how like nature gives you so much more, right? Like one plant gives you so many seeds. It always gives so much more. And I think about as humans, how we just take, like we're the beings that dig stuff up from the ground and burn it and put it on top of the ground, right? We just keep doing that. And here are plants that just, a single like milkweed pod is packed full of seeds and it's just this miracle. And so I don't know, it's addicting and I love it so much. So I do that. And then I just kind of like a lemonade stand, like I post on social media that, I'm giving away native plants and people contact me and then can come by and pick them up. And every year the like plant stand has gotten bigger. And the coolest thing is like people want to connect through this. Like people will just stop and talk about like their grandmother's garden, or I might wake up one morning, come to my front door and somebody has left me 3 tomato plants. Just like, that's amazing, right? Like to have neighbors that will send their son down the street with a baggie of seeds and you can send a baggie back, like to build those relationships has been incredible. And to have people who just now will just drop off milk jugs at my house, like it has been this incredible experience. And so yeah, I just want everybody to be like, come you should have some plants, like why not? Who doesn't need butterfly milkweed in their yard? You need some. And the joy of then seeing like all of the butterflies and all of the birds and like how many different kinds of bees, and then seeing my kids then come running to me and being like, Mom, there's a hummingbird, and then everybody gets in on it. And it's just been kind of life-changing and grounding and really a source of joy, so yeah, it's been amazing.
I think that many people, maybe not everyone, but I think many or most people do like to connect, and they maybe just you literally put yourself out there, like you put yourself out there with paints and you put yourself out there with this table of plants, and so you created this way for people to connect. And for us with the Prairie Foundation and Grow Native program, we love that that it involves native plants. But it's just so amazing what you've done and such an inspiration for so many other people. And for those who don't know, for these reasons, Julie is our 2023 Missouri Prairie Foundation Prairie Communicator of the Year awardee, very deservingly so, as you can see and hear. I know we're maybe running out of time a little bit, but if you have time still to talk about the painting or anything else you want to talk about, but also I would love to see the painting that you did recently that I think is on display still um
Yes.
yeah, from when you went to your visit to Benton County Prairie, the Prairie Foundation's Benton County Prairie, which was so lovely to see you there, by the
Oh my
way.
gosh, it was so amazing. My friend Gina Kaufman invited me to go with her to the prairie dedication. And I was like, yes, that sounds amazing. Um, Also, I have to say that like getting to know people in the kind of like conservation nature world has been amazing. Like the art world is cool, but it's not like uh it can be competitive, it can be secretive, it can be isolating. And so it's been amazing to meet people who are excited and passionate and want to bring you in, you know? So anyway, so Gina invited me and we walked around the prairie. And I remember when we saw the downy gentian, and it was like, I don't know how you all found, I mean, obviously you had to like walk through the whole prairie because there's like one, right, in like all of this landscape. And it was like this like pilgrimage experience, right? Like everybody's going up to it and just looking at awe at this species that indicates this is a prairie, like this has not been plowed. And I learned about um coefficients of conservatism and that there are these plants that, you know, you've got your, you know, your black-eyed Susans or whatever, your Rudbeckia, that'll kind of party anywhere. And you know what I'm saying? Like, and
Yeah.
then you've got your downy gentian that need this intact ecosystem. And finding one is like finding a pot of gold. And so I don't know, I just want to share that experience of amazement. And so in this piece, there's a lot of lead plant because I remember the leader of the tour
Bruce.
was talking about how a lead plant can grow in the same spot for 100 years, and how it was one of the species that they saw. And it stuck out to me because I had tried to winter sow lead plant. Nothing worked. Like it was just nope. And so I was just fascinated by it, and to know that these are telling a story, and that there are people who know how to read the story. And I that's fascinating to me, that somebody can step on a piece of land and I want to learn how to do that, right? And I want to kind of show that amazement. So this was a piece that Rachel Smith invited me to do in the H&R Block Art Space in this show that's all about the prairie, called Finding Ground. And coming up, we're going to have an artist talk that I'll show the date for. I don't have it on the top of my head, but it's coming up in a slide. And here are two details. And one of the things that I did is I did a watercolor of the lead plant, and then I scanned it and I printed it out really large on this sticky backed paper called Phototex. And the white silhouettes of the lead plant that you see are the backing paper. And I thought about how the backing paper was sort of like the loss of these plants. And I think about how they're all supposed to be here, right? Like, and they're gone. And what a huge loss. And people think of this as flyover country, and it's just this rich, diverse, dense, packed, amazing ecosystem that you can't just plant again, right? Like you can try, but it's so complex. You can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna go make a prairie. And so for me, that backing paper, that emptiness kind of resonated with me. And so we're going to have an artist dialogue January 26th at the H&R Block Art Space in Kansas City. at 4:30, and then there's a closing reception, and there's a group of artists who all make different work about the prairie or with the prairie or with the soil. And it's just been amazing to kind of connect with these artists who are witnessing, at the same time, and want to kind of share that with people.
Fantastic.
And this is cool. I'm collaborating. I met Courtney Masterson at the awards dinner. We've known each other on social media, and so we're going to collaborate. And so,
Wonderful.
so Native Lands LLC is doing a piece at the, what's it called? Heartland Overlook HOP, H-O-P.
The HOP, yes.
Yes. So I'm going to do some public work there, and they're fighting the honeysuckle battle and seeding native plants, and it's just been, I'm excited for this opportunity. So that's coming up. And then I've been exploring kind of ways of, how do you show your excitement for something? How do you show your love and your passion? So I've been making work over the winter break in between semesters, kind of exploring different painting languages. And then finally, also over the break, I've been kind of experimenting with our painting department little printing press that we have, and making prints with the witch hazel leaves from the shrub outside of the building, and the yarrow in my front yard, and the blue vervain, and just as a way, like, for me, it's a way of knowing and seeing and making the kind of beauty and detail and just the complex, like, nature of these creatures, these beings, tangible,
Yeah. I like how these prints they illustrate the architecture of the Venetian in a way that maybe another medium wouldn't, and how in every plant there are like paintings within paintings. Like there's designs within designs, design of the seed, the pollen grains have their own design, the leaf venation, the roots. And then when you have a lot of plants together, that makes, then you have landscapes that make other designs. So it's like these artistic worlds within artistic worlds, and your different painting techniques are helping to illustrate that. Really beautiful. I know we have a number of questions. Is it okay if I ask you some of them now, or is there something else you wanted to mention?
Let's do it.
Okay, great. And we do have, let me go here, sorry. Someone wanted to know the address of where the your murals are. So we can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
They're on 77th Street under the Paseo. So, and they're just east of Troost on 77th Street, between Troost and Brooklyn, under the Paseo Boulevard.
Thank you. And we will, we'll include that address in the email that goes out, and we'll include a link to the articles I mentioned, which I think has that address in it as well. Cool. And someone asked, how did you get permission for painting the murals? Like, ask the city or what?
Yes. Yeah. I made a proposal to the city, and that's complicated, right? Like figuring out who's in charge of this bridge. And it was the Parks Department, luckily. And so I didn't have to convince them because of who they are right now. And that native plants were important, which was kind of refreshing. I thought I was going to have to But there is a lot of interest right now in Kansas City and in our parks department about getting rid of like non-native annuals in the parks and all that kind of stuff. So they were definitely open to it. And so, yeah, I had a meeting with them and made a proposal, and then I had to get insurance. And then there was a permit I had to get, and getting a permit is harder than it would seem. It is more stressful. Yeah, it's really complicated. But that was the hardest part. And then, you know, and then figuring out where to get water to power wash. And that was like one of those things where a neighbor was just like, "Oh, I live 2 doors down." And I was like, "I will give you cash if I can use your water." And she was like, "Great." So, yeah, I did make a proposal to the city.
Great. Someone asks, do either you or I have any contact with the Regional Arts Commission in St. Louis? One of their focus areas is community art. Julie, your work is causing healing and unity in community. Would love to see this in St. Louis. Do you have any contacts with the Regional Arts Commission in St. Louis?
I don't. Yeah, no, I don't.
I don't either, except I will say that the Regional Arts Commission provided a grant to the Prairie Foundation last year that funded Ecotones, the Urban Prairie Concert. So it was
cool.
community art. It wasn't visual art. It was musical art. And there will be another the Urban Prairie Ecotones concert in Tower Grove Park in St. Louis in the spring, and you can look for at our e-newsletter and social media and website for information on that. I'm going to see if there are other questions here. Oh, someone says, "Thank you so much for bringing some life to this area. My parents owned a home nearby for 50 years. It's reaffirming and so healthy." Here's another comment. Look up Detroit artist Vanessa German, who was in Topeka recently teaching. Though her work is not ecological, she really rallies young people and local people and creates so much vitality. Kudos for your socially oriented teaching and networking. I haven't heard of that artist. I don't know.
Thank you. I'll look her up immediately. Yeah, that's awesome.
Someone asks, does it sometimes feel like you are rediscovering lost techniques and skills, or preserving skills and knowledges that are in danger of being forgotten?
Wow, that's a great question. Yes, I think that, but I might, like when I started to learn how to make ink from plants, that might have just been interesting to me. Like other people, it might have been obvious, right? But it felt really like exciting. It felt magical, and it feels like like I joke sometimes with students or with my neighbors, like I teach at the Kansas City Art Institute, but I joke that I like secretly want to start the Kansas City Yard Institute, because like we don't realize how many things just around us people have made things from, right? And so like for a while I just had like 3 crock pots going at in the kitchen at any one time, and it was just like, will it ink challenge constantly to see, because I feel like these are ways of making things beautiful and important that many people aren't connected to. There are lots of people who still do these, and I think there's a big resurgence of it. But for me, I felt like I was so removed from the process of making art materials that it really felt quite magical to be like, oh, this is how you can dye a piece of fabric. Like, this is how you can make ink. Like, oh, like, it really has felt like a discovery, but I have but I worry that that's just me. Like that's just me having that. But any way that I feel like any way that we can get people to connect to the natural, right? And to realize they are nature and can be great. So we don't see somebody else, like, so we're not just like, oh, that's like so-and-so's lawn. You could be like, oh my gosh, that's like a huge area of dye or ink, or you could make charcoal and drawings from that. Or I know somebody who can make paper from that. And it just makes it a much more rich walk through the neighborhood when it's not just about who owns what, you know?
Well, and you said, well, maybe a lot of other people know how to do this, but they haven't done it the way you've done it. And they haven't introduced the people that you've introduced to it. I mean, so I think there's a real power in trying something new outside of you didn't go to an ink making class like you did it on, I mean, that's important too, right? That's really important. But and then every time we you show somebody else something that they're coming at it, with a blank slate, they might bring something totally new to it. And that's what's so, that's another layer of excitement. And then the fact that it's happening, in your neighborhood, and it's making people, really appreciate where they live. And I like something that you said when we met a couple years ago, that, it's people who don't live in these neighborhoods who call them blighted. Like, if you live in the neighborhood, you don't call it blighted, it's your neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And so, your neighborhood now has more images and acts, of native plants than probably any neighborhood, thanks to your paintings, right? And so many of your neighbors have access to native plants thanks to your obsession with winter sowing. So it's really wonderful. And I think somebody from your neighborhood is watching, because this person says, Julie is a community treasure. She has united so many of us neighbors and taught us so much. So that's really lovely to have another neighbor. Another person says, such an incredible public project that surely has inspired so many of your neighbors and onlookers. Very courageous and creative. So lots of people are really excited, and a note from someone looking forward to their next visit to see your art. Here's someone says, I'm a botanical watercolor artist from the Potosi area, that's in Southeast Missouri, and would love more information on how to connect with fellow artists and help. So maybe we can take this somewhere else. Maybe we can do something on the road. We'll explore that.
Exactly.
Julie.
Yeah. One thing creates another thing, right? Like everything builds into something new. So I'm excited. Yes, absolutely.
There was a question about the Tower Grove Park event. I apologize, I don't have the date in my head right now, but Erica might have it and she can put it in the chat. If not, it'll go in the email tomorrow, but it's next spring. I want to say it's in May, but I can't remember for sure. But and we'll share more information about when that will happen. I don't see any other questions. I think I was able to answer them all. And Julie, every time that I get to spend listening to you and learning from you and seeing your artwork it's really a joy. And thank you so much for your time today, sharing your beautiful artwork and your journey with me and everybody else who is tuning in now. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for what you do. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate what you're doing so much. I'm so inspired by the work that you're doing. And thank you everybody who cares about plants and tuned in. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. And in 2 weeks, we have another webinar featuring two of Julie's favorite people. Alex and Sydney are going to speak about how to choose and choose native plants for continuous bloom. So you have something always blooming during the growing season. And we've got some prairie hikes coming up in February, lots of other things going on. You can check out grownative.org, moprairie.org. And we'll also share a link to another webinar that Julie was part of, where we had a panel of Julie and 2 other artists all about prairie and contemporary art. So we'll share that as well. Thank you again, Julie. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.